Right across the city, the community newspapers had been bought by Metroland, and they were gouged of all content, and they were just glorified flyers that you'd find on your porch, and then you'd boot them right into the blue bin. And I just thought, what if a paper tumbled up on your porch once a month that actually had really great stories written by great writers?
That's Dave Bidini, musician, author, documentary maker, and founder and editor-in-chief of a new but old-school newspaper, the West End Phoenix. He's our guest on this episode of Explore, a Canadian Geographic podcast. I'm your host, David McGuffin. Welcome to all you explorers out there, armchair and in motion. I've just come in from watering the skating rink on our lake, which feels like a very Canadian thing to say, and also very appropriate considering who our guest is today. It's hard to think of a person who has written more about Canada with as much passion and in as many different ways as our guest today. You might know Dave Bidini as the songwriter and frontman of the Rheostatics, that most Canadian of Canadian bands.
I heard Wendel talking to Dave Hodge last night, and he said that he was confident and keen, and he said that Jock Rod didn't die, so all of us could fly.
Or you might know him for his many best-selling books, like On a Cold Road, or Tropic of Hockey, or Midnight Light, or his award-winning journalism and documentaries, or his latest endeavour, starting up a community newspaper from scratch in his hometown Toronto called the West End Phoenix. The Phoenix is a bold effort to fill the void caused when big newspaper chains started slashing local media outlets right across this country. With a focus on excellent writing and storytelling, it features guest appearances from the likes of Margaret Atwood doing book reviews and Rush guitarist Alex Lifeson. As you'll hear, Dave's inspiration for the Phoenix was his time spent working at the Yellowknifer in the capital of the Northwest Territories. It's a paper that remains relevant to this day by focusing its resources on reporters writing about local issues instead of spending on generic wire service copy and press release journalism. We'll also touch on Dave's deep love of the Toronto Maple Leafs and possibly figure out the cause of their decades-long Stanley Cup curse. So stick around for that. But before we get going, this podcast would not exist without Canadian Geographic magazine. And if you're not already a subscriber, please consider becoming one. You'll not only be helping a completely unique and important independent Canadian media voice, you'll also be getting 6 print issues a year and digital access to amazing, award-winning writing and photography about Canada, its people, land, and wildlife. And your subscription gets you a membership in the Royal Canadian Geographical Society, a nice bonus. So to subscribe, go to cangeo.ca/subscribe. And now, without further ado, my interview with Dave Bidini. Dave Bidini, welcome to the Explore podcast.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
So before this interview, I finally got around to reading Midnight Light, which I loved. It's your book about the North and your period as sort of a guest columnist reporter at the Yellowknifer, the community that's the paper up there, and it's part of a bigger chain of papers. And
News North.
News North,
Yeah.
Exactly. That felt like a bit of an origin story for West End Phoenix, specifically the Yellowknifer. And could you, for people who don't know the Yellowknifer, I've had, in journalism, had a number of friends whose careers started there, but for a lot of people who don't know it, can you just explain a bit about that paper and its uniqueness?
Yeah, it is. You really hit the nail on the head there. It's such an important kind of training ground for young reporters, and you're right. Countless careers have been launched by people who've gone through there. Yeah, I was there for a literary festival in 2014, I think, and I'd never been to Northwest Territories before. I'd traveled everywhere in Canada and found myself up there and really fell in love with the town. It's an interesting place, Dene Nation, the Indigenous culture there is so present. It's such a big part of the city, so that was a great education, and the rest of the citizenry are kind of really, it's a nation, a northern nation of unloved toys in a lot of ways, or misfits certainly. So everybody has a interesting there's a lot of mythology. You create your own personal mythology when you travel so far away to such a remote city. So lots of great raw material for stories and for a writer, and one of the central unifying elements of the city, really from its inception, has been newspapers, journalism, media, and the Yellowknifer is at the center of that. So I was charmed to find a capital city in Canada, small C capital city, that in which a newspaper was still an important part of everyday life there.
Right.
And I'm so grateful, that they were really open to me, open to the point of almost suspicion too, like wondering why I would wanna why I would want to sit at the city desk with them and the other reporters, and so I asked, if I could come for a summer and work for them, and they said, well, I don't know why you'd want to do that, but okay. So I did, and Bruce Valpy and Mike Bryant were really really open to me, and got to know everybody
That's
there.
the owners of the paper?
Yeah, well, Bruce was the publisher. Or was he the publisher? He's a publisher now. And Mike was managing editor and editor in chief, I believe, at the time. And and while I was there, a reporter with whom I became friends, John McFadden, was arrested for obstructing a police investigation. So I originally was just going to go up there to write about the. I wanted to write a book about a northern city, as opposed to a book about being on the land. There's a lot of those. And, the best thing that could have happened to my narrative was John getting arrested. Thank you, John. So I managed to, I was originally just going to spend 4 months up there, and I ended up, being up there 8 or 9 times over the course of 18 months. So because John was arrested, I spent more time up there, so I got to know the city better, which is always, you're always worried about doing a flyby. And then, came home, wrote the book, and realized I hadn't had nearly as much fun writing the book as I had working at the paper. And then so we just kind of applied the Yellowknifer model to the West End here, and that's that's where the paper emerged.
And explain that model, because this is not part of any bigger chain, not part of the Star or the Post Media, or it's a really locally owned, locally run paper, right?
Yeah, not a lot of independent media, as you know, in our universe anymore. So yeah, we started 100% independent and remain that way. There have just been, in the West End anyways, and really right across the city, the community newspapers had been bought by Metroland, and they were gouged of all content, and they were just glorified flyers that you'd find on your porch, and then you'd boot them right into the right into the blue bin. And I just thought, well, what if a paper tumbled up on your porch once a month that actually had really great stories written by great writers, and knocked on doors for the first half a year really, and just asked people if they would be interested in subscribing to community newspaper. Sold 800 subscriptions before we had a single paper printed, and knew that there was an appetite, and knew that people would be interested in it. It helped that people could kind of put a face to the project through me and the band, and that's and so great support, and really lots of love from the community and stuff too. So yeah, that's that. It was just we just listen, in our time too, voices and stories, and knowing your neighbors and knowing what's happening at the corner of your street. It's a 15-minute world now, more so than ever, right?
Yeah.
So that was the angle that we took in starting it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I have a lot emotionally invested in the West End Phoenix, and that one of my bugbears for a long time is sort of based on a Molly Ivins quote, the American columnist, and she said, I don't mind so much that newspapers are dying; it's watching them commit suicide that pisses me off. Yeah, and I feel like that's what these big chains have been doing. There's less and less actual gumshoe reporting, actual people talking to people, it's press release journalism, and people don't want to read it because it's not interesting, right? I mean, why would you want to pay money for a newspaper that doesn't make an effort, So I applaud what you're doing, and my real hope is that you succeed at it. And how's it going?
Yeah, so this is the beginning of our 5th year. And 5 is a big benchmark for any business, really, for anything. And so it's a robust operation. We can exhale a little bit now. That's gratifying. That it doesn't necessarily mean that I can really take the pedal off the gas in terms of, we're subscriber and donor supported, really. We don't have, we had some COVID relief money from Heritage last year. We hope to get a little bit this year too, but mostly it's it's all ground game, really, and it's all it's our neighbors and people within the community that support what we do, and that requires a constant sort of gentle full court press, and that's mostly falls to me. I'm not doing I'm not doing much writing or really any kind of editing or anything like that. And mostly I'm a fundraiser in this capacity and a bit of a dreamer. And we try to do interesting events and stuff too. So, and that can get a little bit, well, it's already become quite exhausting, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
would love to be able to just kind of, be healthy enough that didn't have to worry too much about that. But that's going to require
Hmm.
some sort of major piece to fall, into the way we structure the economy of the paper. And we don't have that yet. So I'm hoping.
Yeah. I mean, I watch what you guys are doing, and there's benefit concerts, and there's a lot of, you have auctions and different things going on. It sort of makes me think about small, like independent booksellers and how they were all dying off, and there was, the funeral notices were written for them many times over. But they're bouncing back now, and they're bouncing back by doing a slightly different model. Like they're hosting events, they're doing all sorts of things other than just books, and it feels like is that kind of the model you see as working as well, or is the ultimate hope just to be a straight newspaper?
No, I think it was Andrew Cash who said, at our last event, who said, you guys are much more than a newspaper, and I think that's probably, I mean, that's also that's just simply a necessity as well, because listen, the amount of people that are going to want to read a print newspaper, that's a smaller group than ever before. So
Hmm.
while we'd love to have tens of thousands of readers and subscribers, we don't. And I don't know if we're going to be able to get there. So we have to sort of support ourselves. But at the same time, we're because we're such a lively operation, and because there's a lot of people that work on the paper that come from music and other disciplines, it's really fun to do that kind of stuff too. We did our News 8 event at a local brewery outdoors in October, and we had 750 people out, and it was a great event, and all the musicians donated their time, and people also, I think, need things to rally around, especially
Hmm.
kind of local neighborhood endeavors and stuff. Now that said, we have hundreds of people that subscribe and read us right across the country, and with the piece in the New Yorker last month, we've had
Right.
dozens of Americans subscribe, which is just crazy and a half
Yeah.
to find people in small town USA wanting to read us, but it's also beautiful too. So, um, yeah, we have to figure out different ways to stay healthy, but we also love to do that stuff too. I mean, I love putting on shows and I love performing and dreaming up
Yeah.
that sort of stuff. And partnerships are big too, I must say. We partnered with Kobo, we've partnered with BMO, we've partnered with Toronto Star. So that's really
Hmm.
nice having those, occasional romances, with people who actually have real influence in the,
Hmm.
in the world. So it's nice to have those allies supporting what we do.
Yeah. And talk about allies. You got Margaret Atwood writing book reviews for you, which certainly is a good ally to have, it seems.
Yeah, she wrote us. She wrote us our first check when we started, 5.5 years ago. So she's been great, totally.
I mean, she's the grande dame of, Canadian literature for sure. What's she like to work with?
Well, I haven't. I don't edit her, but I think she's quite agreeable. I know whenever we've asked her to do something for us, she's always stepped up, and it's been, she's busy all the time. She's just still so lively in the world,
Yeah.
and I think likes to have a good time. And really,
Hmm.
at the end of the day, we're nothing if not a good time, I think, like in terms of the way we put ourselves together. So that's always nice too, to know that whoever, comes to us, it's going to be a good hang.
If I was to say what your focus was in the paper, it'd be the arts and social justice seems to be a lot of what it's about. And I'm just wondering why you landed on those. Is that, sort of what your comfort zone was, or what was the reasoning behind that?
Arts and social justice, I think, are both endangered species in a lot of ways, or those are two areas that are constantly kind of challenged by our society and our world. So those would be, I think it's
Yeah.
important to continue to tell stories from within those realms so that people can just relate to them and know them better, right? So,
Hmm.
we've all seen, just to use arts as an example, um, you could use social justice too, but you look out the window and there's that, you know, person walking down the street with their guitar in their soft shell case, and you know them as somebody who lives, seven doors up from you, but you never really, you know we're all so busy and the world is so complicated. It's off, we live in a country that is still getting used to asking questions, of each other that you never really know the story. So it's up to us to kind of find the story and tell the story of that poet who lives up the street, or that guitar player, or that, that new family that is suddenly in your midst, to tell those stories to each other so we know each other better. And so those are two areas that I think can always use more storytelling.
For sure. I must remember hearing a couple of years ago that, Toronto, which hosts the Toronto International Film Festival, has like 2 full-time movie reviewers, staff movie reviewers. And,
I know.
There's voids there to be filled.
Well, and I know this as a writer too. There used to be, this is 15 years ago, maybe a bit more, I'd get calls from, the Vancouver Province and Winnipeg Free Press and Montreal Gazette. And, I remember when the Habs were sold to an American, I think I wrote something for the Gazette. And the phone used to ring all the time. So you'd have all these opportunities to write. It was great because it kept you busy between books, but it also was a little bit of money in your pocket, and you develop your audience. Those calls don't come anymore just because they're, media is such a conglomerate, and, there's not the money that there was before, and people just publish less. So we knew that when we started, there were a lot of really great writers, in our neighborhood and beyond, who were sitting around not writing. So we at least have given them the opportunity to stay as busy as we can, accommodate. And people like Michael Winter and Claudia Day and Heidi Sapinka, Eternity Martis, they're all great, great, great writers. But the nature of the game means they only really produce a book once every 3 or 4 years, if they're lucky. So we get to have them all the time. And we're so grateful for that. So unfortunately, the sad thing is that you've seen the decline in those opportunities at large. But for us, it's actually a bit of a gift, because we have sort of people at our disposal who are just dying to write and dying to work, and we can facilitate those ideas.
Obviously, the hope is, and I believe this, is that good writing will find an audience in the end.
Yeah, you hope so, eh? I mean, and I do think at the end of the day, you're right. You can just do what you do well, or as well as you think you can do, and then you're scattering those seeds on the breeze. Often it's like, they'll find a home, and they'll find an audience, hopefully. But that also takes, at the end of the day, I think it begins and ends with just like hard work, and also just mitigating or knowing what your idea of success is as well. I know that with the band too, we never were really able to kind of cross over into that, land of big audiences and that sort of thing. But, it's 42 years later and we're still playing and making records and stuff. And I don't think I would trade that for that popularity that we never really achieved, because we were able to just be creative and cohesive and unified together in terms of what we wanted to do. So I think the paper is a little bit of the same too. If we can just keep from drowning, and we can keep, doing what we do well, then people will follow us, and incrementally it'll get bigger and better every year, hopefully.
Mm-hmm. Can you just tease us what's coming up in the next issue? What can people look forward to in terms of the writing?
It's a food issue, so it's a lot of so it's not restaurant based. It's mostly like just people's discoveries in terms of what they do at home and the role that food plays in their lives. And there's food security stories too. There's stories about foraging for wild components that people have used to make stuff. And there's a large double-page spread cartoon about a scamp who keeps leaving cold cuts in the junction in Toronto, and as a result, there's been a coyote problem in the West End because of that. So,
nice.
And we have a standing comic memoir this year too by Julian Taylor, the great songwriter, about his experiences growing up. So yeah, there's a lot of great stuff this issue, and then we'll probably follow up. We do a music and a sports issue every year, and we're going to do that, I think, next year. And we're also going to look at the nature of travel and speed and transportation as it exists in our cities. And we're going to twin up with some other places around the world, I think, to generate some stuff too, which is going to be great.
Huh, interesting.
Yeah, well, and it's nice because there are not that every city has a West End Phoenix, but there's independent journalism happening everywhere. So trying to piece that together a little bit with other partners at our level too, to generate interesting writing about transportation, because it's always great to see what other communities are doing and how those ideas could be applied to what we're doing here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just got the 200 units edition right beside me here, which is just an amazing piece of journalism. It's an issue that's completely dedicated to the lives of people in this low-cost series of apartment blocks and the mass evictions that are going on there. And just, I mean, that's the kind of writing people will come back for, right? It's just...
Yeah, thanks. I think so too. We did. Are you in Ottawa, David? Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, we actually have an Ottawa connection that's very, very strong.
Mm-hmm.
Two criminal lawyers, Donald Bain and Mark Ertl, are in Ottawa, and they're friends of mine. Donnie, they've both done incredible social justice work on their own, but we have a mutual friend who passed away a couple of decades ago, Joe Burke. He was also a lawyer, and he was on his way to an Ottawa Red Blacks game, unfortunately, when he first took ill. But we wanted to do something in his memory, so we launched the Joe Burke Journalism Endowment last year, and we had Eternity Martis submitted an idea about racism and really the reality of people of color when it comes to jurists and juries, and what people of color have to face when they're looking at an all-white jury, and how that plays in terms of injustice. And it's great because the Justice Department is actually going to use that as as a vector for addressing the situation, which is great too. But we had all these incredible applicants and only one award. But one of those people that came to us with an idea was Abby Plenner, and she came to us with this idea about writing about the West Lodge Towers and the single unit, and going into there to get the stories to illuminate the conditions of affordable housing in our anyways, a bit of an Ottawa connection there, and it's nice to see people from cities other than ours that want to get involved and participate, and we're really grateful that they put up the cash and they made this happen, and that helps,
Right.
It's great, with Eternity as well. It just helps her get through her, literary life, and allows her to have that economic stability where she can go in and really devote time to working on these stories rather than worrying about, what.
Yeah, and just to have the luxury to be able to spend that time, which again in journalism these days you don't have, right?
It's so true.
Gotta,
Yeah. No, I agree.
No, absolutely amazing. Can we talk hockey?
Sure. Anytime.
Okay. So I have one of my favorite Dave Bidini moments, and I was a Leafs fan growing up. I was Ballard era.
Yep.
But I think for like a lot of Leafs fans in that era, Wendel Clark was like this bright shining light that cleared away the darkness for a while. You in Kelvington, Saskatchewan on Hockey Night in Canada, you went out and shot was it a hometown hockey segment?
I think it was Hockey Day in Canada.
With Wendel Clark?
Yeah, Hockey Day.
And there's a moment there where at the end where you're sort of at the frozen stream where he learned to skate and play hockey in the middle of this snow-blasted prairie.
Right out here, there's the rink. A non-snowy day, you could skate for a mile and a half that way, run over the road and skate for a couple miles that way.
Holy smokes.
There, big moose running
Look
through.
at the moose.
There's the moose going across the road.
Wow.
And it had to be, I think, the most Canadian moment I've ever seen.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. Like you're right, there was like a very small stand of trees, right? That's the prairie, right? It was, and that one moose, the moose came out in the middle of I think it was was it not the Trans-Canada? If it wasn't the Trans-Canada, it was a highway for sure. And it came out and it looked at Wendell, and Wendell looked at the moose, and the moose was just like, yeah, I'm out of my depth here. And it just sort of scattered ran into the culvert. But that was a fun trip. We were out there. We were in Lloydminster for Hockey Day in Canada. That's what happened. And it was cool, it was me, Wendell, and Greg Schell, and who's the Leafs one of the Leafs skating gurus, and we were in the truck, his F350, I think, and we were heading out to Kelvington, and I visited the school where went to the rink where, they held his dad's memorial, and then had our moment
Yeah.
with the Moose. And the next day I talked to Greg, Torchy is his nickname. I said to Torchy, I was like, that was really great to do. And he was like, Dave, I've never heard Wendel talk more in one road trip in my life, which made me feel really good that he felt comfortable
Yeah.
enough with me. And I have a shorthand with hockey players. I don't know why it is. We just came back from, I just interviewed Espo, Brad Park, and Dale Talon in Florida for a project that I'm working on.
Right.
And it's just,
That's on the 72 Summit Series, is that?
yeah, it's we're not actually able to announce it yet, but everybody knows what
Okay.
I'm doing anyway. So, but nothing is really official. But it is, anyways. Yeah, we're working on a 72 project. So
Yeah. So Espo and
yes, so but it's neat. I find that often in sport, even more so now because there are fewer just reporters. Getting back to your original conversation, just on the ground talking to them, but a lot of guys don't get asked a real question, or
yeah.
they're not programmed to answer a real question too, right? Because everything is so tight in terms of their handlers
Mm-hmm.
and stuff. So that's always really great when you can kind of punch through a little bit, and there is an intelligence to to sport and to athleticism and competitiveness, and it's great when you can kind of get around on that, and you can see them really trying to think about an idea that's framed in a way that it hasn't been framed for them before. So anyways, I feel really close to the community, and honestly, when I was having a tough, when the band was, maybe floundering a little bit in terms of our popularity, and when I was having
Mm-hmm.
trouble getting published, the hockey community, there's still so much that has to change, and it's still so diseased in many ways, and there's so many
Yeah.
problems. But I've always found it really, I'm a white guy in his 50s, so it's a different ball of
Mm-hmm.
wax. But I found them really, really supportive of all the ideas I've ever brought to that culture, and really supportive of what I do too. So for those reasons, I think it's important to kind of do what I can to help bring like a different flavor or different ideas to the culture. But Wendell
Mm-hmm.
welcoming me in his truck. I was I'm a weirdo with a funny haircut that plays in a strange band, and writes weird books. It was nice to be, yeah, to
Yeah.
him being open to me and others being open to me in terms of what I do.
But you care about the game.
I
Yeah. And as
care.
you say, you're coming from a slightly different angle, so it's interesting for
Totally,
them, right?
totally.
Yeah. 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 I've got somewhere in storage, I think, a TTC ad of Wendell
Oh
Clark
yeah.
holding up this. It was a Toronto Sun ad. It said, "We'll be there." He's holding the cup, and it must be from '87, which
Oh great. So it's their fault.
you can blame the Toronto Sun. Yeah. um, so I have this pet theory that one of the main problems with the Leafs is that there really should be about 3 teams in Toronto or in the Toronto area, and that there's so much focus, national, local media on this team that it's just unbearable.
Yes, it's both. I mean, I could also argue that being a Leaf in this town, even a losing Leaf, even the worst Leaf, you're
Uh-huh.
still, you walk into a neighborhood rink, or you go to the
Yeah.
bar, or you go to out for dinner. People love you. People love you because you're a Leaf. I mean,
Hmm.
Twitter would suggest otherwise, but it's not true. Like
Right.
if Jonas Hoagland, moved next door to me, like it would be the
Yeah.
greatest thing in the world. It's Jonas Hoagland.
Yeah.
Like I hated Jonas
Yeah.
Hoagland, but he was a Leaf,
Yeah.
man. So
Yeah.
it's both difficult and really easy to play hockey in this town. And I think you get killed 7-0, and you go down to the variety store, people still hold you in thrall because of who you are, and we hold that gig is held way too high in terms of our society and our community, but that's just the nature of who we are largely. And so it's both a blessing and a curse, I think, to be playing hockey in this town.
So you've sort of come at writing about Canada in a ton of different medium, and what is it about the country and this people that's obviously just catches your attention?
It's still a young country, and there's still so
Mm-hmm.
many stories to be told, and
Mm-hmm.
listen, it's for years. I think literature is a little bit of an exception. certainly the other mediums fell short. We were just like such a we were a colonial nation culturally, with the exception of indigenous arts and culture, obviously, but outside of that, we were always slave to both the Brits and the Yanks. This is especially true of music. Where growing up, and even with the Rios, people would try to get us to cut the Canadian shit, and to sound more homogenous or more like a band who came from L.A. or London or New York, and so that's really right up until the 90s. If we only really started to grow out then, that's not a long timeline. That's 30 years, right? So there are always more and more opportunities. And with the country changing so much and with so many new voices coming in, there are just so many more sort of lines to follow and threads to follow. And I think that's a bonus, as a young country. We should use that as an opportunity, right, to tell those stories. It'd be harder, frankly, to be a writer in those other places because those stories have been told over and over again, and there are fewer opportunities to be new. So I just always kind of looked for that. When I wrote On a Cold Road, my first book, it was M&S. They didn't even make a hardcover edition. They just went straight to paperback because I think in the back of their minds they wondered why anybody would want to read about Canadian music and Canadian musicians, and the same was true for Tropic of Hockey with, why would people want to read a book about hockey that's not about the NHL, and so on and so forth. So it also, it's great because it justifies looking for different ideas. And I think there's enough interested readers and listeners who will follow a different view as opposed to the same old story. It's always good. It's always good to go to a new place. The air is better there generally. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so I just moved back to Canada after like 2 decades away in 2018. And the thing that's really blown me away is just sort of the Indigenous revival and all the arts and culture and the voices that have come back on that. And, and it's such a unique part of what this country is too. And it's such a positive thing to see that being embraced now, and such a strength for us as well, I think.
Yeah, it's just so sad that for so long those voices were, denied any kind of platform, and now it seems that we're correcting that. And that was my discovery in Yellowknife about learning about people whose families had been there for 10,000 years, and hearing the stories of Kaicho, and the stories that you only ever heard were about John Franklin, as opposed to the Indigenous elders and the leaders up there who facilitated him, and then you wonder why we never learned about those stories in school when they're so remarkable. So it's great to have those stories, and so and incredible writers and people who whose work and whose personality and identity really lends itself to a much better literary and arts landscape in our country. Right. It's really worth celebrating. Right. It's a beautiful, and in that sense, it's a beautiful time to be alive as an artist in Canada, for sure.
So last question, because I know you need to get going. It's a question I ask all our guests. Is there a special place for you, your favorite place in Canada? It might be a happy place that you go to in your mind, or a place you just love to visit and sort of unwind, or what is there a special favorite spot for you in Canada that you go to?
Canadian Geographic. Okay, I see what we're doing here. No, it's funny because really we could talk about place all day long, because it's such a big part of our national geographic and social and cultural identity, for sure. Boy, oh boy, and it's hard for me to rank to talk about a favorite place. And a lot of those places too are just are so hard to get to. Also, whether it's Gros Morne, or whether it's the Western Arctic, or whether it's Haida Gwaii, or whether it's the Qu'Appelle Valley, and or even southern Saskatchewan. I want to go back. I was at the Moose Jaw Literary Festival a few years ago, and Saskatchewan Tourism gave me the keys to an SUV, and I barreled south to Val Marie because I promised Brian Tracci I'd visit the museum that had his dad's rodeo gloves under glass.
Oh, right.
I went down there, and but driving through southern Saskatchewan was mind-blowing to me. How just that ocean of valleys, and coulees, and down south near Assiniboia and Burning Hills, and grasslands basically is down at the bottom of Saskatchewan, and the land is roiling, like it is remarkable, and there's no one around, like you are alone on this tumultuous landscape. I'd like to go back there. I'd like to go back with my family. A great place to get not literally lost, but because I came close to that as well, but to lose yourself in your imagination in a place so vast and open, and varied. So
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, Dave Bidini, thanks so much for coming on.
My pleasure. Yeah, this has been a real treat. Thank you.
That's it for this episode of Explore. If you enjoyed it, please rate and review us. A 5-star review really helps these interviews reach a much wider audience. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time, when we'll explore again, I'm David McGuffin.
I think right now we're enjoying very much looking back at the Earth, and it's just a fantastic experience, and I just can't wait to get back and start telling people
We
about
left Simpson about June the 10th with the Fur Brigade, consisting of a number of yacht boats, each manned by 10 voyageurs.
For us Inuit, it means that Inuit oral history is very strong.
We flew low over every inch of the country that could be. We were hoping that he would fire at us.